Obama's plan for a quick airstrike was running into obstacles on multiple fronts. As the president waited for the inspectors to finally leave, powerful voices around him were urging caution. On the day of Selstrom's visit to East Ghouta, Obama received a letter from congressional leaders warning him against taking any military action against Syria without first seeking legislative approval. Engaging our military in Syria when no direct threat to the United States exists would violate the separation of powers provisions of the US Constitution, the letter admonished. Later that day, one of Obama's closest foreign allies, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, offered sobering advice, telling the Democrat that he risked being left on a limb unless he slowed down and let the UN investigation take its course. Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes, who listened in on the call, said afterward that the president's confidence seemed to melt away. It was the first time I saw him look uneasy about acting in Syria, Rhodes later wrote. But it was another ally, Great Britain, that delivered the biggest blow. British Prime Minister David Cameron was an early supporter of military action, and his government began making preparations to participate with the United States and France in a three-nation airstrike against Damascus. But privately, Cameron was telling the White House he needed a delay of a few days so he could organize a vote in Britain's parliament supporting a military intervention. For the Tory leader, the vote was more than a mere formality. Many in the United Kingdom still resented their government's decision to follow the United States into a war against Iraq, and Cameron wanted political cover before committing British forces to another open ended engagement in the Middle East. It was not to be. Despite a last minute scramble by Cameron and a public appeal to Britons to uphold the international norm against the use of chemical weapons, the authorization measure fell short by 13 votes. Britain was officially out of the coalition. To the White House, the British vote was like a bucket of ice water on hot coals. Obama's aides were incredulous and also unnerved. It spooked everyone, recalled a participant in that week's West Wing meetings. The next day, August 30, the White House released an unclassified summary of the U.S. intelligence community's assessment of the Ghouta attack, asserting with high confidence that the Syrian government carried out a chemical weapons attack that killed 1,429 people outside Damascus. The document's publication appeared to presage the launch of missiles as early as that weekend. Yet instead of ordering a strike, Obama stepped out of the White House that afternoon for what would become the most widely chronicled walk of his presidency. Under a late summer sky, studded with fair weather clouds, he and his chief of staff, Dennis McDonough, went for a long stroll through the White House's gently rolling south lawn, meandering through the ceremonial gardens and groves of magnolias and ancient oaks. Through the countless hours of debates in the Situation Room, McDonough had been a lone voice urging restraint. What would come next? He would ask, according to Rhodes's account. What if we bombed Syria and Assad responded by using more chemical weapons. Would we put in ground troops to secure those stockpiles? Somewhere along the way, Obama arrived at a decision. When he returned 45 minutes later, he announced to his staff that he would seek a formal authorization from Congress before launching the airstrike. His decision meant a delay of several days, certainly, and perhaps even weeks. But philosophically, it hewed closer to the ideals of a younger Barack Obama, who, as a senator and presidential candidate, argued for restraint in the use of military force. We've had enough of presidents who put tough talk ahead of real diplomacy, candidate Obama had said in a 2007 campaign speech on the Iraq War. Despite the shift, as his advisers huddled through the weekend to retool the White House's Syria strategy, Obama continued to argue that a military strike was necessary. After the red line threats, he said U.S. credibility was at stake. The laws and treaties prohibiting the use of chemical weapons were worth defending. To a person, Obama's national security advisers agreed with the decision to go to Congress, as several would later recall in written accounts of the weekend's meetings on Syria. The only significant dispute was over whether Congress would go along with Obama's plan. To many senior aides, it was a no brainer. Of course, lawmakers would want a hand in punishing Assad for the horrifying deaths of children and other innocents that Americans had witnessed on their television screens. Most Democrats would fall in line behind their party's leader, and Republicans, traditionally the more hawkish party, could scarcely object to a limited strike against a Syrian dictator who allied himself with Iran and allowed his country to serve as a transit hub for jihadists who killed US soldiers in Iraq. Against this consensus view, only Susan Rice, Obama's national security advisor, sounded a note of dissent. Counting on lawmakers to take a principled stand was a fool's bet, she said. Congress, Rice told the president, is never going to give you this authority.